presented by Homefield Apparel.
Hello, folks, and welcome to our live show here from Homefield at Tracks. I'm Galen Clavio. I'm joined by Ian Plaskoff from the Hoosier Network, and this is CrimsonCast on the Back Home Network as we get ready for this weekend's contest between the Indiana Hoosiers and the Wisconsin Badgers, the last home game of the season for IU football, at least in the regular season. We'll see what happens with the postseason. But, Ian, great to have you on the show. First time, I think, right?
It is, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And hello to all you wonderful people here at Homefield at Tracks. A lovely day, just a Chamber of Commerce weather day here in Bloomington. Somehow, some way, we got the great weather weekend on the last home game of the regular season. You don't always get that.
No, you don't. And especially with the snow on the ground last weekend, it was looking a little sketchy with the weather coming in, but it's going to be beautiful on Saturday, and it's just going to be the perfect afternoon.
It will indeed. It's supposed to be 60 degrees all the way overnight, and it's going to be, I think, a 74-degree day in Memorial Stadium. It's senior day, celebrating this group of seniors, some of which have been here for their whole time, some of which have transferred in from James Madison or elsewhere. And that will be a group that I think a lot of people are going to want to celebrate. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the matchup between Wisconsin and Indiana, a bit of a lopsided matchup according to the bookmakers. And we'll see what the statistics have to say on that with stats courtesy of our good friend Taylor Lehman from Bite-Sized Bison. And then we'll talk some IU basketball as well, as the Hoosiers off to a hot start offensively. This feels like this is almost like getting out of a snowstorm and jumping into a hot tub, in terms of the way that the shooting is improved and the way that the offense is moving. It's been an exciting time to be watching this Indiana basketball team. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. If you are in Bloomington, we hope you're coming down and joining us here at Homefield at Tracks, this beautiful renovated space on Kirkwood that many people since the 80s have been coming to for T-shirt purchases, music sales, whatever. They got all that and more, plus a full collection of IU apparel and just some delightful different types of apparel available. They've got something new. Can you grab that hat for me down there, Ian? If you're looking, we don't need it tomorrow at all, but just a really, really nice knit hat with the palm on top, Indiana Hoosiers. I'm going to get one of these. I might need to get a slightly large one. My head is kind of abnormally large sized. But this is a really nice hat. We got that. We got the varsity jackets here in the store. Do you have one of the varsity jackets yet, Ian?
I don't.
Put it on your Christmas list. Put it on your holiday list, whatever. Just a really nice look. I never could pull off the varsity jacket myself because I didn't play. I was broadcasting sports in high school. I wasn't playing any of them.
Same here.
Yeah. But a whole variety of amazing apparel here for Indiana University, and you can just walk down the street. The first brick and mortar store that Homefield has opened, probably not their last one, but this is where it all began, if you know anything about the story of Homefield Apparel. So we're excited to be here this evening. We've got some folks in the live chat, and we're going to be talking about everything under the sun for IU here over the next 45 minutes to an hour. So we'll go ahead and dive into that. We got some folks that came in to said hi. Good to see you folks. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Big picture, first of all, before we get to the matchup between Wisconsin and Indiana, the Hoosiers 10-0 for the second time in their history. The first time was last year. 2 10-0 starts to seasons. Now, last year, they lost that next game, going on the road to Ohio State, a much better circumstance now. They got the really hard games in the Big Ten out of the way early. A tough game last week in Happy Valley. I was out there. Were you out there for that one?
I was field side. It was insane.
It was insane. I don't think I'd ever seen anything quite like that ending drive and that catch by Omar Cooper Jr., amazing throw from Fernando Mendoza. But what's your overall take on where this IU football team is physically and kind of emotionally at this point in the season?
Yeah, I think a lot of the conversation last year was circled around where these tough games were played. Like, you think about Notre Dame this year, they got their 2 tough games out of the way, their 2 losses in the first 2 games of the season. For Indiana, it was smooth sailing up until the Ohio State game last year, and then it was that recency bias when playoff time came around. This season, all the hard games are out of the way, and it's kind of the easy backstretch for Indiana towards the end of the season. I mean, Wisconsin has struggled this year with injuries and the gauntlet schedule. Purdue has not won a Big Ten game in 2 years, I think, and The recipe is there for Indiana to go 12-0, and it's a lot easier than it was last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you've won at Oregon, when you've won at Iowa, when you've won at Penn State, you've gotten so much of the heavy lifting out of the way, and it's a completely different conversation right now for Indiana football on the national scene from what it was last year. You know, I talked about this on the podcast last week. At this time of year, it kind of felt like last year's team was kind of hitting the limiter, like physically, emotionally. They were on the ride of their lives that they'd never been on before. And you could see in the Michigan game at home, and certainly in the Ohio State game, and then honestly a little bit in that Notre Dame game as well, it kind of felt at points that they'd hit their limit. I don't get that sense from this year's team. Every time we think they've hit an ending point, they seem to find another gear or a way to extend things further. And it's just a completely different conversation now than what it felt like last season.
Yeah, from being around this team on a day-to-day basis, you can tell it's all business. It's not like we're trying to make noise, we're trying to change how people think anymore. That was all last year. Now Indiana's they consider themselves an established program in their own locker room. So they're acting upon that. It's all business every day. And health-wise, it's a lot better than last year. There are some precautionary issues that Indiana's holding players out for, but again, it's Wisconsin and Purdue to finish the year. It's not terrible to do that and get guys ready for the playoff. But no, I totally agree. It's a team that feels like it's continually on the rise. There's no leveling out. And just when you think they're going to lose to Penn State, that happens, and the momentum is right back with them. When you see a dip, they come right back up. Happened at Iowa, happened at Oregon, happened at Penn State. The resiliency of this team is really something to marvel.
And I think what's been really impressive is the way that they've found pieces to rise to the occasion. I couldn't be more proud of Omar Cooper Jr. and the way that he has risen to the occasion throughout the course of the season, but especially the last couple of weeks. You called the Maryland game for WIUX, and then obviously you were there at the Penn State game. To watch him adapt to a new position, but still make big-time catches, get himself into positions where he is open, and use his athleticism in ways that he had never really been asked to fully do in even last year, let alone previous years. And he's done all of that without Elijah Surratt on the field. Surratt draws so much attention from defenses, and it's really been up to Omar, EJ Williams, Riley Nowakowski to figure out ways to keep the passing game going. That's been impressive. We've seen the same thing on defense. The linebacking core has stepped up. Aiden Fisher was missing for a couple of weeks. They stepped up and figured out a way to get done. Isaiah Jones has emerged. Elijah Hardy has emerged. You've just seen guys doing what they need to do, and sometimes it's completely different guys from week to week, and that is generally the hallmark of a team that can go deep into whatever postseason is available to them.
Yeah, on paper, this team doesn't really scream depth at some of the more key positions. And with Surratt, some of the most important things he does is not catching the ball or even getting targets. It's pulling defenses away from the other guys.
Blocking downfield,
like as well. And you look at the Penn State game, and that presence that Surratt has just wasn't there. But then Charlie Becker comes around and goes 7 for 118, pulls the pressure towards him, and that allows Omar Cooper to explode late. So it's kind of a give and take with this receiving core of how it works, and it could be anybody's day on any given day. And also, Riley Nowakowski, I did not expect him to be this much of a receiving threat coming into the year. I thought he would just be like the fullback that he was,
right?
And come into the season block like a Zach Horton type player, and he has really surprised me.
We asked in the preseason. Well, first of all, I think we thought Holton Stays was going to be the catching tight end, and Nowakowski was going to be the blocker. And you think about the way they used the tight end position last year. Horton was so good at blocking, and yes, he made some catches, but ultimately it was really up to the other receivers to do what they needed to do in support of Curtis Rourke. And Nowakowski's opened up this entire other segment of the offense. It's also interesting, though, because a lot of it is the way Fernando Mendoza likes to throw the ball versus how Curtis Rourke likes to throw the ball. Rourke loved to use the boundary, loved to throw to the sideline. And while Mendoza can do that, Mendoza uses so much more of the middle of the field. And we saw it pay dividends in that Penn State game. The Becker catch on the sideline was amazing. The EJ Williams catch on the sideline was amazing. Obviously, the Omar Cooper catch in the back of the end zone. But what made the drive was that post pattern by Nowakowski where they find him over the middle. And that's just not something we would have seen Indiana likely do last year.
Yeah, and that also is credit to Mendoza's arm because he's able to zip this ball into tight windows. And Indiana ran 4 verts, I think, every play of the final drive against Penn State. And that was just feel from Nowakowski to work around that linebacker in the zone to get over the middle. If Rourke threw that ball, it probably would have been picked off because of just he didn't have enough juice on the ball when he threw it deep. And he also didn't have a healthy ACL, but that's besides the point. That
hurt too, yes.
But no, with Mendoza, he's not afraid to let it rip and try and find guys in tight windows. Same with that Omar Cooper Jr. catch on 2nd 18 after the sack. And that really set the tone for the rest of the drive as well.
Yeah.
And the throw at the end of the game to Cooper is what it was, and I don't think that can ever be replicated. But some of these throws that Mendoza makes, it can make or break a football game for Indiana.
Yeah, it's heartening to watch as Mike Shanahan and Whitmer and that whole group of offensive brain trust have worked with Mendoza to open up the offense some more. And the fact that they've been able to leverage the running game so effectively while also simultaneously keeping the passing game open when they needed the passing game, they've been able to draw off of it. And that's going to be what makes them a difficult team to beat as they go down the stretch, because you can't just shut down one aspect of what Indiana does and be in good shape.
Yeah, Fernando Mendoza said it after the Maryland game. Everybody was talking about, Mendoza didn't have a great game at Maryland. They ran for 370 yards against the Terrapins. So when you shut down one thing, one other thing pops up, and this Indiana offense, like you said, is just extremely difficult to defend. And then on defensively, if you flip it, Indiana is very good at shutting down one-dimensional offenses. So you kind of see the flip side. And we don't know. It depends on the playoff matchup, but surely every team that is in the playoff at the time Indiana will play them is going to have some sense of a multi-style offense where they can do both the run and the pass. And this Indiana team is primed for it, and they're primed to do it to other teams as well.
Galen Clavio and Ian Plaskoff here for CrimsonCast. We're live from Homefield at Trax. We got some folks in the store. A beautiful night here in Bloomington on Kirkwood Avenue as we get ready for the final home game of the regular season for the Hoosiers. And a lot of people in town. I have had so many people reaching out trying to get tickets, and this is the place to be. People want to be watching IU football in person. Another sellout tomorrow, 2 straight years of sellouts throughout the course of the Big Ten season. And I think it's going to be an amazing atmosphere. Senior Day happening early, but we want people to stay for the entire time for some reasons we'll talk about, not just celebrating the seniors, but there's some other reasons why it'd be great to see a full 60 minutes of people being in the stadium. Before we move on, just wanted to remind everybody of something that we talked about the first time we were here at Homefield at Trax earlier on. We are supporting the Homefield and Abbott We Give Blood drive. Every 2 seconds, someone in our country needs blood. When you donate through Abbott and the Big Ten's We Give Blood drive competition, you're not just helping your school compete to win $1 million for student or community health, you're saving lives. Plus, you can score a limited edition Homefield t-shirt if you go through this program. So show up, donate, turn school pride into purpose. Go to big10.org/Abbott to find a donation location in your community and get in on the action. I've seen the Indiana shirt. It's a cool looking shirt. You get a crack at that if you donate through this program. And folks, the school that's in the lead, I believe still, is Wisconsin. And I know that we've got the largest living alumni base for Indiana University. I think we can do better than Wisconsin on this. So head over to, again, big10.org/Abbott, find a blood giving donation location and take advantage of that. Help out the Big Ten, help out Indiana, and get yourself in line for a free shirt from Homefield. All right, let's dive in and talk about this matchup against stats courtesy of Taylor Lehman and Bite Size Bison. S&P Plus really likes the Hoosiers in this game, a 98% win probability in this game. They're projected to win 41-6. When you look at these two teams, what sticks out to me is a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned the tough schedule that Wisconsin's played, second toughest strength of schedule in the nation. And as Kurt Cignetti noted in his press conference at the beginning of the week, Luke Fickell has not exactly had a full deck on offense. He's on his 4th quarterback. They beat Washington last week. Impressive in that they won. Not an impressive game to watch, but the punter had half the passing yards for Wisconsin in that game. Their offense is essentially broken and has been for pretty much the entire season.
Yeah, the punter led the team in passing yards. So that's kind of like James Carpenter out rushing Purdue last year. It's
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yes,
it's not great. Yeah, Wisconsin ranks 135th out of 136 teams in the FBS in points per game at 12.6 and total yards per game at 255.6. 130th in FBS in passing yards and 117th in rushing yards. I mean, again, you can only do so much when you're playing Alabama, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, Indiana this Saturday. I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
And you're on your fifth quarterback, and one was 3 for 12 last week. Somehow they won, and credit to Wisconsin because a Big Ten win is a Big Ten win. So
it looked like a classic Iowa victory, but for Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But yeah, you look at the overall numbers. Indiana comes into the game second in FPI and second in S&P Plus, fifth ranked offense, fourth ranked defense, 14th ranked special teams. And in FEI, which is probably my favorite statistic at this point, just in terms of how it encapsulates several different statistical trends, they're first in the country. They're sixth in offense. They're third in defense. And you just kind of go up and down the list. Sometimes I feel like IU fans they love this team, but they aren't actually aware of how good they are statistically. I think maybe having ESPN not available to YouTube TV subscribers has maybe increased the knowledge of how good this team is, because if you go off of if you're on ESPN, people act like Indiana's this like mid-level team. No, this is a top-level team statistically, performance-wise on both offense and on defense. Wisconsin, despite being 3-6, 62nd in FPI. So they haven't played that bad statistically on defense. They're 34th in the country in FEI. They're 46th in defense in S&P Plus. But they're 119th on offense. They're 107th on special teams. They're 118th in offensive success rate. They're 135th out of 136 teams in yards per game. You look at the comparison between these two teams, the Indiana offense versus the Wisconsin defense. Indiana has shown an incredible ability to have success in both the passing game and the rushing game, and Wisconsin has not really done a particularly great job of stopping either of those. Where they do a good job is they limit explosive plays, and they do a pretty decent job of stopping teams on third down. Not stellar, but they're kind of upper half in college football this season. Indiana has not really relied on a ton of explosive plays so far this season, but they have gotten a few here recently, including several in that Penn State game. If Wisconsin's going to have a chance in this game, their defense is going to have to play at a level that they haven't really been able to play at all season. And it's going to have to be in both the rushing and the passing phases, because it's really, as we talked about earlier, hard to stop Indiana when they get one of those rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good thing for Wisconsin is that defense travels. The crowd is not going to be an impact for the defense. The crowd obviously gets silent when Indiana is on offense. But you think about Indiana, this is something that stuck with me the whole year. And Fernando Mendoza said this after the Kennesaw State game. He just wants to be a point guard. He doesn't need to do anything flashy, just needs to get the ball to his guys, dump it off, let his playmakers make plays, and when he has an opportunity downfield for an explosive play, he'll take it, which doesn't happen much, but it does happen. So, matching up against this Wisconsin defense that has 5 interceptions on the year, which is very low, 2 forced fumbles, it doesn't get a lot of turnovers. Maybe you see Indiana get a little bit more aggressive offensively, and you might also think about stat padding for the Heisman campaign. And I know Cignetti does not care about Fernando's Heisman campaign, but maybe we'll see what happens with the play call.
I know Cignetti will not say he cares about Mendoza's Heisman campaign, and I think the key is in games where the statistical benefits for him in building towards the Heisman are not, that's not going to be the overriding factor.
Right.
I do think in games like this, that's where it's like, yeah, let's keep him in there, maybe have him throw a couple more touchdown passes, perhaps.
I think it would be a win-win situation where, one, you can run up the score and get back for that 83-20 game in 2010, and then also get your guys some individual awards and recognition.
Or the 62-14 game that happened a couple of years later. I was here for that one. I still have nightmares about that game. Looking at the flip side, Wisconsin's offense has been worse than their defense, all things considered. Just a real rough go of it. And I've tried to find something positive. That they're kind of okay in line yards per rush, which is a measure of what kind of push their offensive line can get in the rushing attack. So they got that going for them, I guess. And they haven't turned the ball over an insane amount. They've only turned the ball over 12 times this season. But again, Wisconsin, I am anticipating that offensively they're going to try to take a page out of Michigan State's playbook when they played Indiana here, where Michigan State just tried to chew as much time off the clock. The difference was Michigan State has playmakers. They have great receivers. They have Aiden Childs. Wisconsin has none of those things.
Right.
So you can only run clock if you've got the ball, and that requires you to be able to convert some first downs. And that's not really something that Wisconsin does well.
For Michigan State, if Jonathan Smith was able to script every drive, they might be in bowl contention. But unfortunately, that's not how the game is played.
Yes.
As for Wisconsin, yeah, you're going to need to throw the ball at some point, and that doesn't tend to go well for Wisconsin. And they're on their 4th and 5th quarterbacks this year. Hunter Simmons has completed 50% of his passes with 5 picks this year. And Carter Smith, true freshman, was 3 for 12 for 8 yards last week against Washington. So they're going to prioritize the run game, see what they can get out of that. And I was on the same train of thought, chew as much clock as possible. Indiana will do the same in the second half if Indiana's up big and run every play in the second half like we've seen. That's pretty much the game plan to look at.
If you want to read Ian's preview of the game, you can go to the HoosierNetwork.com where it is readily available for you, and I highly recommend it. Great work by him, as always. When you look at this game and you think about the way that Wisconsin's season has gone, we mentioned like they had the win against Washington. Now, there were a lot of caveats with that, not the least of which was the weather. And I don't know that you could get a more opposite weather day as expected tomorrow versus what you saw up in Madison for that game last week. That was brutal looking.
Yeah.
As bad as the Iowa-Oregon game looked, that looked far worse.
Yeah, I was watching both of those at the same time after the Indiana-Penn State game, and there were times where I couldn't see across the field with the cameras being so covered up by rain. But honestly, if you're Wisconsin, you would prefer that in this game over the clean weather that is supposed to be here this weekend, just because you want to get this game as messy as possible, and because Indiana thrives on when games are clean-cut, organized, and they can go on, do their thing, and get out.
You mentioned the gauntlet of the schedule. You mentioned some of the teams. If you look at the Big Ten teams, the closest analog to Indiana that Wisconsin's played this year has been Ohio State, statistically speaking. And Ohio State beat them at home 34-0 in Camp Randall Stadium. They did do a good job of stymieing Oregon's offense. But again, I think it's worth noting that game in Autzen was in terrible weather conditions. It rained a ton there too. And there's something weird about Wisconsin seems to have Oregon's number a little bit. They struggled last year. Oregon did against Wisconsin in Camp Randall. Iowa beat Wisconsin 37-0. I'm still trying to figure out how exactly they did that. But you look at the rest of the games, they just haven't gotten any offense going. If you exclude the Middle Tennessee State game from earlier on in the year, who is not a good football team, they've scored 17, 14, 10, 10, 0, 0, 7, and 13 points on the season. Meanwhile, Indiana averaging
45.4, I think is the number.
Yeah. So, look, Wisconsin's got dudes on defense. They've always done a great job of recruiting and developing well. So from a physical perspective, this won't be as stout of a test as, say, Penn State was, because that's a different level of recruiting. And probably not as much as Iowa, but it's also not going to be like Maryland where you just don't have the depth or the talent on defense. So Indiana will need to be a bit clever. I am really fascinated. Indiana has struggled a little bit the last few weeks in getting that push on the line to run their running game the way that they were earlier on in the season. In the Maryland game, they had to switch to more of an outside running attack. They were running a lot of stretch plays. They were kind of trying to get their guys outside the tackles, and that was a bit of a surprise. And in the Penn State game, obviously, they were really struggling. They had one of maybe their worst rushing game on the season. I don't think they're going to have quite the same issue, but I am interested to see how Indiana's offensive line, still down Drew Evans, and still some question marks about the health of a couple other guys. Again, I think Zemihalski was out with a little bit of an injury last week or didn't play that much. What kind of push do they get, and what does Indiana decide to do as far as trying to get that running attack going?
Yeah, when you think Wisconsin, you think offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, and running backs. And that is kind of what the case is this year as well for the Badgers. And, for Indiana's run game, I think they're going to start by prioritizing it, trying to establish it to get that play action, the RPO game open, and then let Fernando Mendoza loose late. But, who knows? Curt Cignetti has surprised us many times with just coming out of the gate firing and just letting guys loose when they see the opportunity with the receivers on the outside and deep plays. So I do think Indiana will run better than usual. Wisconsin's front seven has actually been pretty solid, up in the top-ish middle of the pack in the Big Ten. They have, 21 sacks, 48 TFLs, so not terrible. The back end has struggled a little bit in turning the ball over and giving up some yards to receivers. So Wisconsin will play to its strengths. That's the front seven, and I think Indiana will play to its strengths, and that will be really being balanced and pulling guys in. So I think Indiana will try to establish the run. I think it may take a bit, and I think they will eventually, and then open the floodgates.
CrimsonCast live from Homefield at Tracks. It's a busy night here on Kirkwood Avenue. We've had a lot of folks coming in and out of the store, checking out the wonderful array of apparel that they have available here. There's even some of the older Tracks-focused merchandise, plus some LPs in the back, and then you got all the Homefield stuff here in front. We've got some great newer designs that have come out. All the hoodies are very prominent here up at the front. We got the IU drop shadow quarter zip right in front of us here, and a bunch of other great options. Some great hats here too. They've just got a really nice combination of different caps available. So head on down here to Homefield if you're listening in. Hopefully you can join us for the last half of the show. Galen Clabby along with Ian Plaskoff here on CrimsonCast. We'll have a full lineup of content coming up for you this upcoming week. You can tune in on Sunday as we'll be recapping the IU football game, myself, Scott Caulfield, and our normal weekly recap on Sunday. We'll also preview what's going on with the polls, as Indiana still second in the college football playoff poll, still second in the AP poll, still second in the coaches poll, although they've kind of had to hang on a little bit as Texas A&M has gained some ground. And then later on in the week, the big red carpet with Rhett Lewis going to be coming at you on Monday. Rhett providing his insight as a former IU football player and longtime broadcaster with NFL Network and Big Ten Network, a perspective that is unique within the IU environment. You should tune in for that. And then later on in the week, of course, CrimsonCast, we tell you James Turner and Scott Caulfield where to place your wagers if you are so inclined. And then we'll be back next week with a special on football weather as we recap what goes on with the College Football Playoff Committee. And, as we come out of this Wisconsin preview, first of all, let me get a score prediction from you.
Yeah, I said this on Pack the Rock podcast with the Hoosier Network. I'm going 45-3 Indiana.
I like that number. It's not outlandish, but it's more than Alabama beat Wisconsin by, which I think is, if you remember last year, Kurt Cignetti made sure to beat Purdue by 7 more points than Notre Dame did, just as a comparison point. I think that if Indiana is in a position, they will ensure that they beat Wisconsin by more than Alabama did. And so I'm going to go with a similar vein. I'm going to say 52-6. So right around the same neighborhood. We have seen the line drop a little bit. I think it was at 30.5 or 31. It's dropped to 28.5. I'm not surprised by that. Let's be honest, 30 is a big number.
It is.
Especially for a team that just won a game in the Big Ten. But this Indiana team, A, they've shown they don't really care about the spreads one way or the other, but B, when they get rolling early and can keep it consistent, they just kind of steamroll teams throughout the course of the game. And I could see Wisconsin, having gotten that scalp last week, being like, well, we're not going to go winless in the conference, so maybe we're not going to worry too much about that. But that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and they've also signed on Luke Fickell for all of next year, so that is not a concern job-wise for him. Just go out, try and see if you can get any sense of momentum, get some guys developed. But I do think this will be pretty dominant from Indiana. I think we're going to see fewer than maybe 5 or 10 passes in the second half. I think it'll just be run all the way.
Yeah, I mean, the less you have to, what's the old Woody Hayes thing, only 3 things can happen when you throw the ball and 2 of them are bad. I don't really believe that at all, but I am interested to see Fernando Mendoza, how he picks the defense apart and if he can get some things going early, because I know that Indiana's got some wrinkles they'd probably like to work out, because this is their last game for a couple of weeks. They got the bye next week. It's great, but you miss having that consistency of being able to play regularly, and you want to make sure that you've got your offense working effectively going into that last game of the season on the road at Purdue. So, I'm curious if they throw a couple wrinkles in just to give not Purdue really, but maybe whoever their opponent is in the Big Ten title game, a little something extra to think about over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, the late bye is a really interesting thing to think about, because on the one hand, it helps you get healthy. Now, do I think Surratt will play against Purdue? No. Do I think Drew Evans will play? I don't think he'll play until the CFP. and then other guys like Mahalski getting healthy. I think it'll be a good bye to get those guys healthy, but you also lose that rhythm, like you said.
Right.
And Indiana's a team that's very process-oriented, rhythm-oriented. So when you break that and come all the way back into the 100th bucket game, you got to go all in, and we'll see how that pans out. But plenty of time until then.
Let's talk CFP real quick. Indiana maintains that second spot. It's a little bit of a different year now than it was last year in that and I think about this a lot, the Big Ten championship game is both more and less important in some ways. It's really important for Indiana if they get there, which I still can't bring myself to say definitively because I've been scarred too many times, folks, as you know. But, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I'd be shocked if they don't make it. To be able to win a Big Ten championship, the first one since 1967, would be amazing. So there's already incentive there. But, we've heard a lot about how last year Oregon kind of got screwed because their reward for winning the Big Ten was that they had to play Ohio State in the second round. That won't happen this year because Ohio State last year was only the 8th seed because they gave the top 4 conference champions buys in the first round.
Not smart.
It was not smart. So you ended up with Boise State as the 3 and Arizona State as the 4. Ohio State should have been the 6th seed, but they ended up being the 8th seed as a result of that ordering. So not that whoever the 8 or 9 might be, it might be Oregon and Notre Dame. I mean, that was what it would have been in this most recent one, but it's not quite the same thing as it was last year in terms of you're going to face a better team than the actual 8 seed would normally be in that old format. So that's where I think for Indiana, whether you end up going to the Big Ten championship game and winning, or whether you lose, whether you're the 1st seed or the 4th seed, it's a little bit of a different spectrum now in what you'd be anticipating. Hoosiers are in really good shape, metrics wise, strength of schedule wise, strength of record wise. They compare so favorably. The one question mark is, does the committee look at what Texas A&M is doing and say, well, gosh, they should be ahead of them? I don't see an argument in terms of their schedule or what they've accomplished. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that at this point?
Yeah, my thoughts right now are that there's a pretty clear-cut 1 and 2. It's Ohio State and Indiana, then there's slightly a drop-off when you get to Texas A&M and everything below. But when when the actual bracket is being made, I think it'll go Big Ten winner, SEC winner, and then I do think they put the SEC loser above the Big Ten loser, but depending on who it is.
It also kind of depends on what happens between now and then, because Alabama's got to play Oklahoma this week, and then they're going to have to play in the SEC championship game. A&M still got to play Texas on the road.
Yeah.
And Texas has got to play Georgia, who's right behind. It does make for some interesting scenarios that you can't really game out because a lot of those teams are pointing pistols at each other at this point.
Yeah. As far as the seeding goes, before you play the conference championships and everything like that, I don't think Indiana would be mad with anything 1 through 4.
Yeah.
You get the bye. If you are the 5, you get to host a game, but we're past that point. That would have been cool last year.
Right.
And it's kind of a matter of one location because you don't really want to play an SEC team in SEC country, depending on what bowl you're in as well. But there is still plenty of time, and the SEC's going to beat up on itself for the next couple of weeks, and that'll sort itself out.
It does feel like the Big Ten, the Indiana, Ohio State, whatever order they finish in, the winner's going to go to the Rose Bowl. The loser's probably going to the Orange Bowl. And it feels like the Cotton and the Sugar's likely going to get the SEC champ. You don't think so? Okay, 3's going to get the Cotton. That's
Dallas is closer to Tuscaloosa than Miami.
we're getting
It's closer to Bloomington than Miami, and it's obviously closer to College Station than Miami.
I'm getting geographical feedback. I appreciate. Thank you, Zach. I appreciate. So we'll see what happens with that, but it does feel like either way you're going to get that split between those two teams. And I mean, for Indiana, you would love to go back to the Rose Bowl in that circumstance. So we'll see what happens as we move forward with things. But I'm excited to see how this last few weeks plays out, not just here in the Big Ten, but across the country. And the big question mark ends up being Ohio State. They got to go into Ann Arbor.
Could be 5 in a row.
It could be. I have a hard time seeing Michigan doing it again, but we just talked with an Ohio State fan who was talking with us right before the show, and they really felt like Michigan was primed to pull that upset. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Bryce Underwood in that kind of game does not wow me in
Right.
any way. And
But then did you even think it was possible last year?
No, that's
Right.
the thing. But I mean, Bryce Underwood's thrown 7 touchdown passes. Michigan's defense is excellent as it always is. The run game's excellent.
Yeah. It would be a game where they get out physical, Ohio State. And there is a question mark there because Ohio State just, since that Texas game, hasn't really been challenged at all. And Michigan's going to put a challenge up there that's going to be something that they haven't really seen. I mean, even the Penn State game, they were challenged in the first half. And obviously Penn State ran out of gas in the second half. Ohio State asserted themselves. But I am really interested to see how that plays out. Anyway, a lot to evaluate across college football. We're looking forward to doing it. And we'll be here to talk about it on the Back Home Network and on the Pack the Rock podcast on the Hoosier Network. You can search that on Spotify and YouTube and all the other fine places. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about some Indiana men's basketball as the Hoosiers are off to a 3-0 start, but that's not really the story. The story is this offense.
It's fun.
It's wild. Indiana, as many of you are very well aware, had an offense that was predicated on a lot of two-pointers and a lot of post play and a lot of post-ups and a very non-modern style of offense. And Darren DeVries and his staff, we knew that they were likely going to come in and run a more Creighton-style offense, one that was really predicated on spacing, ball movement, and shooting. And it's early yet, and shooting percentages are season averages as opposed to individual data points for a reason. But realistically speaking, this Indiana team is off to a scorching red-hot start shooting the ball. I think 12th in effective field goal percentage in the country, one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. And it is like watching an entirely different program play basketball at this point.
Yeah, when I go in to cover a game at Assembly Hall and I look on the court and I see a team wearing an Indiana jersey playing like that, I'm like, no, that's not how it's supposed to be. But that's how it is.
Yeah.
And like when you're scoring as many points per game as what would qualify as a fever, you're doing something right. You're scoring 99.5 points per game. And the three-point shooting, they've been 14 to 28 the past 2 games. The way they're getting these shots, it's not like, I mean, when they're open, they take shots, and that's what they're encouraged to do. The shot charts are just beautiful. It's just underneath the basket and outside the arc. There are no patented former Indiana long twos.
Right.
And it's just fun. It makes me excited to go watch Indiana basketball now.
It is. And look, I mean, they're mission forward with a comment in the chat, concerned about team defense and rebounding. We're not very big up front. You live or die by the three. I think it's a little overly simplistic in as much as I don't think the defense has been bad necessarily. And there haven't been, good to see you guys. There haven't been there aren't that many teams on the schedule that I think are going to overwhelm Indiana physically in the post. Michigan certainly could. Purdue could as well. But this happens a lot in college basketball, and it's not always an automatic, wow, they have bigger guys, therefore they are going to beat us. When I look at Indiana's defense so far on the season, they're top 40 in Ken Palm. Their adjusted defensive efficiency is under a point per possession, which is good. And you look at the individual statistical numbers, they're doing a good job of holding opponents to a lower shooting percentage, particularly from outside the arc. They're only allowing opponents to shoot 29.2% from three. And time will tell if that's really an accomplishment. We don't know how good Marquette's going to be from that level. But I don't see a lot of glaring issues. The one that I would say actually has very little to do with rebounding. Indiana is giving up a lot of free throws. They fouled a bunch. They've been out of position on some things. I think that's something that they can address. But I think the team speed and the fact that you've got a lot of interchangeable parts that can switch basically almost every position, unless you're going up against a really mobile 7-footer, which there just aren't many teams like that on Indiana's schedule, they should be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think what this team lacks in height, size, and rebounding skill, it makes up for in the ability to steal the ball, force turnovers, play fast, and shoot the ball as well. And that works with the spacing as well, because this team can play 5 out with any lineup that exists. I mean, when you have Reed Bailey as your 5, he can play out near the arc because he can pass, he can dribble. Sam Alexis, same thing. He's been hitting 3-pointers early in the season, which I did not expect much of, but he's been doing it. And then Indiana just plays fast. They're active on the ball on defense. I mean, we saw Tatum Conway dive for a loose ball up 25 against Milwaukee, and it's just the new energy, the new style of this Indiana team. It's like what you have an effort can outweigh what you lack sometimes in size.
Well, and I think it doesn't just affect the play on the court. That effort and that energy that this team has exhibited, and even like the off the glass alley oops from Enright to Reed Bailey, it is endearing this team very early to the fans in a way that we just haven't seen over the course of the last several years with Indiana basketball. It feels like this team is like completely locked in, completely engaged. And I felt like if they could actually translate that to the floor, we heard a lot about that in the offseason. We heard that was how they're going to play. Darren DeVries, his whole mantra was, I don't know how good we're going to be, but when you come out and watch us play, you're going to be like, wow, that was a really hardworking team. And so far they've delivered on it. And that really goes a long way with this fan base.
Yeah, absolutely. And I watch after every game, I take a look down at the fans sitting courtside. And you see Darren DeVries fist bumping all the fans, greeting them, making an effort to talk to them. Players go down just as they would do a handshake line with the other team, they do it with the fans sitting courtside. They're active in the community. They're engaged. Hoosier Hoops on Kirkwood right behind us was a fantastic event to get everybody engaged as well. And it's something that we for so long, Indiana basketball felt like a separate entity from the actual school, and the players didn't feel like students. That's changed, and it's very noticeable.
Yeah, it's a cultural kind of reset for Indiana just in terms of how the team is relating. And even DeVries, it's hilarious. There was a clip going around from the weekend game against Marquette of him like flipping out as Indiana missed a couple of back cuts going to the basket. And it's like that really does resonate with this particular fan base. Is a fan base that does understand basketball by and large, and they love seeing a coach that engaged in little things along those lines because I think to them it speaks to the kind of basketball that in many IU fans' head is the idealized version. Today, you know what today is?
I don't.
It is the 39th anniversary of the release of the movie Hoosiers.
Oh, yeah, I did see that posted somewhere.
So, and I think about that all the time because that movie for many people from that era was kind of the platonic ideal of that kind of thing. And it's cool to watch Indiana start to reconnect with the fans and to play good basketball while they're at it. It's going to be really fascinating. A couple of games. I think this Incarnate Word team is going to be an interesting one to play against coming up on Sunday. It's still a game Indiana's projected to win by a very decent margin. They've got one of the weakest teams on their schedule the following week against Lindenwood. But then during Thanksgiving break, they've got Kansas State coming in here. Now, Kansas State is not great. They're probably in the same general vein as Marquette. But that is a Kansas State team that loves to score points. That could be a really high-scoring game. Last night, they ended up, what was the final score of that game against Cal? They beat them 99-96. They scored 98 against Bellarmine. They scored 93 against UNC Greensboro. That could be two triple-digit scores potentially in that game. You hope not. I hope Indiana plays defense better. But Kansas State is number one in the country in effective field goal percentage right now. That's going to be a fascinating thing to keep an eye on.
And Marquette doesn't wow me offensively, and Indiana hasn't played a team that has. I really do enjoy Milwaukee. That I'm going to watch them in the Horizon
I was really impressed with them. I got to say. They're mercurial, but they play a really quick pace, and their offense I think has a lot of cool elements to it, and they really do play hard.
Yeah, I think Amar Aguilar, number one in black in what day was that? Days are flying by. Wednesday. Yeah, number one in black on Wednesday. Amar Aguilar is, if you have not watched him play basketball, I would highly recommend because he makes shots that are just, you ask yourself, how did that go in? And that really is Seth Hubbard as well made some crazy shots in that game from the mid-range area. But yeah, Milwaukee was a fun team to watch. They don't wow me offensively. Marquette doesn't either. I think that Kansas State test will be the first one against a team that, like you said, can score and can score better than really anybody in the country. And that'll be a good gauge of where this team is at defensively as Big Ten play looms shortly after.
Yeah, the Kansas State's big downside is they can't hang on to the basketball. They're one of the worst teams in the country in turnover percentage so far, but they pass the ball really well, and they're shooting 54% from three so far this season. That's nuts.
Not bad.
No, it's not bad at all. Obviously, everybody's looking forward to that segment of games at the beginning of December, and this is what I would say. Indiana will have this nice kind of 7-game pathway to that point. And then Wednesday, December 3rd, they travel to the barn, take on Minnesota, who's probably not going to be very good this year. But new coach, Nico Medved, coming in from Colorado State. Then, of course, the big day, Saturday, December 6th.
That is the day.
That is the day. That is the day that IU fans have been going to bed dreaming about, as Indiana they play Louisville at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in the middle of the afternoon. And then, of course, the Big Ten championship game that evening, which we assume Indiana is going to be in as well for football. And then the following Tuesday, Penn State comes into town. And then the following Saturday, another big day, because not only does Indiana play Kentucky in Rupp Arena for the first time in 16 years, 15 years,
something like
it's been
that.
a long time. But of course, also, what is else going on that day?
Would be the Heisman finalists that are announced that during the game.
During the game,
yeah.
I mean, 2 weekends in a row for Indiana sports that may be like nothing we've seen in decades, maybe ever. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to keep an eye on. But certainly a good start to the season for IU basketball. And you mentioned Sam Alexis. Anybody else on this team that's been surprising to you in terms of how they've played so far to start the season?
Well, I think I'll flip that a little bit and say a player that I am curious to see how they grow and develop into this team, and that's Nick Dorn.
Yeah.
Saw him for the first time against Milwaukee, averaged 15.4 points per game at Elon last year, 6'6", can shoot over anybody. He can guard 1 through 4, but we don't know where in this lineup he's going to play. Now, he came in, hit his first shot in like 2 minutes, and then came out with foul trouble. Came in the second half and really shined, hit a 3, tough layup through contact. I'm excited to see where he fits in because that's just another element that can space the floor, take pressure off of Wilkerson and DeVries and everybody in that starting 5. It's just going to be tough to guard.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how these pieces continue to come together. And it kind of feels like we've seen what the 9-man rotation is going to be at this point. And I like what I see so far. Reed Bailey has been an interesting revelation. I was not sure what to make of his game watching it on film. He is far more athletic and far more willing to put the ball on the floor. I don't know that I've seen a player like that for Indiana in a long time. It was meant to be kind of a joke tweet, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, maybe I wasn't too far off, but he kind of feels like the Gen Z Jared Jeffries in a way, at least offensively, not so much defensively, but he's got that kind of frame. It doesn't help that he wears the number that Jared Jeffries wore as well, but he's got range. He can shoot from outside, but he can also put the ball on the floor. He does a good job of passing. I'm really fascinated to see, as long as he can stay out of foul trouble, how he evolves throughout the course of this season.
Yeah, we think about Indiana bigs in recent years, and obviously Trace Jackson-Davis was one of one. Umar Bala was solid, Khalil Ware, but they're all focused on interior play and interior presence. I mean, Ware could stretch the floor a little bit, but Reed Bailey is a true stretch 5 that is designed to be a stretch 5 in this team, and that's having a guy with a cutout role to do that. We haven't seen that at Indiana in a long time, and that new element, I mean, he's an excellent passer. Indiana, we've seen utilize his back cuts more than any other Indiana team I've seen. And Reed Bailey can pass. He can handle the ball up top and around the arc. And, yeah, he's an interesting presence. Defensively, a little bit worried for when they play Michigan, Purdue, those teams.
I'm mostly worried about the fouls.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I get concerned about with him because he's already demonstrated an ability to get into foul trouble against lesser opponents. I'm hoping that they're able to even that out at some point as they move forward. But no, really fun start to the season for IU basketball. And hopefully if you haven't planned on it yet, you should get down to Assembly Hall for one of these games coming up, as it will be a lot of fun watching this team play basketball. They certainly can put points up with the best of them.
Yeah, the crowds have been really good in the first 2 games. The student section's been awesome. They've been up to about the second to last row in the lower level, and the crowd's been energetic. They haven't been full, but they have been loud.
Yeah. That's going to pretty much wrap it up for us here. And Ian, as always, a pleasure to chat with you and certainly appreciated your insights on everything. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, as always, to our partners and friends at Homefield Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions. And you can step into their brick and mortar store right here at the historic Tracks location on Kirkwood. We've had a great inflow and outflow of people throughout the course of the day. And thanks to all of our friends who stopped by. I got my tailgate buddies from Lot 12 who came in with Zach Osterman, and he came in and was giving us geographical advice. Audrey Hausberger, an alum for a couple of years ago. Several other people stopping by and saying hi as the show went on. So we appreciate all those people. We appreciate you folks watching along from home. And if you're watching this after the fact or listening to it on your way to the game, we hope you have a delightful weekend. Get on down here, support the Hoosiers, go watch the game. Hopefully you're in the stands as this senior class says it's goodbye to the regular season in Memorial Stadium, but certainly not the end of the season, as there's a lot more football to be played, we think, for this Indiana Hoosiers team. So for Ian Plaskoff, I'm Galen Clavio, live from Homefield at Tracks for Crimson Cast and the Back Home Network. We appreciate you folks joining us as always. Be sure to tune in on Sunday, as we'll have the full recap, myself and Scott Caulfield, on the Back Home Network, our full roster of shows, including Assembly Call. They're back doing post-game shows, big red carpet, football weather, sideline stories, the whole kit and caboodle. Stay never daunted, folks. So long, everybody.